President of the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund, and I'm delighted you're all here tonight. I'd particularly like to thank the Office of the Borough President, who has been, he and his staff have been absolutely fantastic. In a few moments, I believe he will say a few words. I'm also delighted that we have panelists here from US PERG, from NYU's Merit Institute of Urban Management, WEACT, Resilient Red Hook, the Electric School Bus Campaign, and Align, all partners equally committed to advancing electric school buses. The evidence is clear, how harmful diesel school buses are to our children. And we've brought you all here tonight to talk not only about the problems they present, but also the potential solutions. School busing in New York City is definitely in need of a complete overhaul. We have started a new school year this month, but children are being picked up, taken on circuitous routes, and are in the same dirty buses that they were 12 months ago. More than 2 million New York children ride to school on diesel buses each day, and these buses are in fact the largest form of mass transit in the country. We will be discussing how diesel emissions adversely impact air quality, put children at risk of asthma, cancer, and other illnesses, as well as what the economic impacts are on their parents who have to take off time from work to take care of their kids who are home with an asthma attack. Given the harmful impact of diesel buses, I think we have to look at what the alternatives are, and not only what the alternatives are, but how we actually put those alternatives in place. There are opportunities to transition to electric school buses. The recently announced plan on how to invest the Volkswagen settlement money, funding 40% of the buses, and we're going to be advocating like crazy for a chunk of that to go to school buses. We're also going to be pushing for the New York City Alternative Fuel Vehicle Voucher Incentive Fund and the Zero Emission Vehicle and Fueling Infrastructure Rebates for municipalities. I know it's really a mouthful. That provide incentives for school buses. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce, I've been looking at your picture this whole time, the Borough President of Brooklyn, Eric Adams.
Thank you so much, and really all of you and all the partners, the league, and everyone who's coming together to have a conversation around electric school buses. And it's really the continuation of a conversation we have to have on re-examining how we are doing things in so many areas, and particularly around our children. And those are some of the things that we would like to do here in Borough Hall, as when we get together with Operation, the conversation around Reset. And this was one of the ideas that came out of the Reset conversation, hearing from those in the field of how do we really not only talk about ways that we can really sustain our environment, but to actually implement some real low-hanging fruit to make it happen. And this conversation must continue, and then we must take steps in the right direction. And that is what we're doing here in Borough Hall. We have to dismantle all of those beliefs that have historically held us back from really creating a healthy environment. And when you start to think about some of the things that we have uncovered here in Borough Hall, it's mind-boggling. Everything from processed meat in our schools that we sell to our children. We serve to our children. We serve 980,000 meals a day, approximately, of processed meat. And the WHO has identified processed meat as being a type 1 carcinogen. Yet we're still feeding our children this every day. The failure to allow women to breastfeed, the microbiomes that come from breastfeeding and help develop a child to prevent asthma, diabetes, obesity. Women attempt to breastfeed and we look down on her, and that's why we have a lactation room here in this building. Feeding people in hospitals food that promote diseases. we feed crises in this country and particularly in this city. And so we were successful in opening the first nutrition plant-based clinic in the oldest hospital in this country, Bellevue Hospital, so we can start reversing diseases and not feeding diseases. And so when you look at this electric bus conversation, it's unimaginable that we're asking why are our children getting sick every day, particularly in the inner cities, where they have to use this form of transportation, diesel fuel, toxic fuel, and we are feeding the asthma crisis. And when you begin the process of doing an analysis of some of the crises that are at the far end of what we are attempting to pour money into, you look at who's the culprit of feeding the crisis, and we are. The practices that we carry out every day, those practices are causing the crises that we are attempting to pour a cup on the blazing fire of crises that really permeates the city. And so this is a portion of stopping the crisis, being proactive and not reactive. Moving to electric vehicles, the time has come. The amount of research and dollars that we are going to continue here in Borough Hall to put in place to encourage people to move towards a fleet of electric vehicles. This is the right opportunity, the right thing to do. So I cannot thank you all enough for being the visionaries. I say over and over again, you know, when you think about some of the great visionaries of yesteryear, everything from Gates understanding that we didn't have to have a Walkman anymore, we could just use an iPhone to collect our music. Henry Ford, who said, I wasn't trying to build a faster horse, I wanted to build a car. All of these great minds who saw far beyond what people were and was willing to take people to that next level to say we can do better. That's where we are right now, and you're part of that. And all those who participate in our reset meetings, we cannot thank you enough, and we cannot thank you enough today. Let's continue the conversation. And I know that much of what we see today, we're going to be preaching to the choir, but consider this choir practice. We have to get everyone up there on tune, because right now they're off key, and let's get them in the right place and have them starting to believe we can do better. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Adriana Espinosa. I'm the New York City Program Director for the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. Thank you so much to Borough President Adams for being here today, for speaking. Thank you everyone for coming. I also wanted to thank our foundation who helped make this possible, the New York Community Trust, for allowing us to put on this event. So the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund is a 501c3 organization that does three things with the mission of educating New Yorkers to become effective advocates for the environment. Those three things we do are nonpartisan electoral activities, civic engagement campaigns, and policy forums like the one, the town hall that we're at here today. Today is the first day of Climate Week, so this is a timely discussion. But we hope to use the time tonight to focus on one greenhouse gas in particular, diesel, and one vulnerable population, in particular, children. So I'd like to use this time actually to now call up our panelists. You guys can come up and have a seat. And I'm just going to go in order, starting with you, Peggy, and you guys can take just 2 to 3 minutes to introduce yourself and your organization. And then we'll go do some questions, and then we'll have some Q&A with the audience.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Peggy Shepard, Executive Director of React for Environmental Justice, based in Harlem and Washington, D.C. We have been working for the past 30 years, we're 30 years old this year, on a range of environmental justice issues concerning Northern Manhattan neighborhoods, and working within the national environmental justice movement made up of hundreds of grassroots organizations around this country. We really began our first campaign around air quality, working on issues of sewage treatment plant emissions, and working on issues of diesel bus emissions. Because Northern Manhattan neighborhoods host over 1/3 of the city's diesel bus fleet in uptown depots. So from the beginning, we started, filing a lawsuit against the MTA for building another depot in Harlem across from a public school. And we really began to realize very early on that diesel emissions were fueling the asthma epidemic in Harlem and in other neighborhoods like Harlem around the city. So we have been working on children's environmental health, on whether it's air quality, water quality, lead in drinking water, lead in homes, and a variety of environmental exposures that impact children the most because they are the most vulnerable.
Initiative that the government started after Sandy, and our committee was asked to come up with solutions and ideas for resiliency in our neighbourhood. And we spent 8 months and many community meetings talking to our neighbours about issues that were in our neighbourhood that troubled our community. One of the issues that came up, and something that I'd actually already been advocating about, was diesel pollution in our neighbourhood. My personal introduction to diesel pollution was when a cruise ship terminal opened at Edinburgh Street. And I discovered that these cruise ships were going to be idling 24 hours a day, or whenever they were in port, and burning diesel while they're in port. And I discovered that these cruise ships were, they were just going to be idling, but there was a solution. There was the technology to plug these ships into shore power, to plug them into the electric grid, stop the emissions, and the ships can still come, and our vulnerable population, as we discovered during Sandy, wouldn't be affected. Now, Red Hook is in the middle of a whole lot of diesel sources. The port, the BQE where there's trucks, and also Red Hook is the home to many bus terminals, buses, school buses are parked in Red Hook, and we're a truck-heavy neighbourhood because of the port and because of other things, and more to come. So, as part of my role in the Resilient Red Hook Committee, we've taken on the issues of pollution, of diesel pollution. We are advocating for an electric transportation sector in all means, from the ports to trucks, and now, of course, to school buses. So we're a vulnerable population. We have kids with a Hunter College study during 2009 said our kids have a 40% asthma rate. So we're very invested in trying to clean out air, move to the 20th century technology and move away from fossil fuels, and create and advocate for an all-electric, zero-emissions transportation sector. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Matt Casal. I'm the Transportation Campaign Director with USPIRG, which is the United States Public Interest Research Group. USPIRG is a national nonprofit advocacy and education group. We work on various public health and consumer issues, including lead in drinking water, and of course, transportation campaigns, which is what I work on, recognizing that our transportation system, which is rooted in the 20th century, is car-centric and is polluting our air and harming our climate, needs to be brought into the modern world. And that's everything from investing in more public transit and walking and biking options and switching away from our fossil fuel-based system to an electric, zero tailpipe emissions system. At USPIRG, we often say that there are more problems in society than we're dealing with, but there are also more solutions than we're putting into place. And we see our role as doing the research and the public education and the media work to spotlight those problems, help craft the solutions, but then really the most important part is putting in place the actions needed to get those solutions in place.
Hello, my name is Kevin Cromar. Thank you for our host for inviting us. I'm an associate professor at New York University. I have appointments in departments of population health and environmental medicine and school of medicine, and I direct the air quality program at the Merit Institute of Urban Management. I also currently serve on the Utah Air Quality Board, so I know the difficulties of implementing policies, and so that is me.
Thanks. So I want to start by setting the stage on the impacts of diesel pollution generally. So Kevin, can you explain the public health impacts of diesel pollution, and then Matt, can you follow by describing some of the environmental impacts of diesel pollution? So specifically to the climate?
Yeah, so there's two things you need to know about diesel pollution. One is the exposures from diesel emissions, and the other one is what are the health impacts of those exposures. So on the exposure side, a diesel vehicle is emitting a lot more pollution than a vehicle powered by regular gasoline or obviously electric vehicles. Now, if all the school buses were converted away from diesel, it's really not enough to change pollution at the city level, but it has a dramatic impact for the children actually riding the bus. So for a typical child, a good portion of their total outdoor air pollution they're exposed to is coming from that school bus and it's occurring during their commute. So it's not a city level pollution issue, it's really an issue for those children and riding the bus. Now the health impacts from it, there's both health impacts from the short-term exposures and the long-term exposures. The short-term exposures is really most important for kids who already have respiratory disease. So in many of the neighborhoods in New York City, it's not 40% in every neighborhood, thankfully, but somewhere between 10 to 20% of kids may have asthma or other respiratory disease. And for those children, when they're exposed to diesel exhaust, they have increased rates of bronchial constriction, tightening of the airways. They also have increased rates of airway responsiveness, which is what you don't want and leads to asthma attacks. And so then as a parent, anyone who has kids, it's frightening, the idea of your kids having one of these attacks. And it really comes when you're exposed to these high levels of short-term pollution. Now the long-term impacts, then I'll pass the time over. Children who are exposed to higher levels of pollution, especially from diesel exhaust, their lung development, lung growth is stunted. So all of our kids, our lungs are growing as they grow, but if they're exposed to higher levels of pollution, their total lung development is less than if they were exposed to less pollution. And this is critical. It has lifelong impacts on their health. The promising thing is as you reduce those exposures, there's been good studies showing that the children who would have had decrements actually can recover and respond. So there's hope for improvement, but that long-term impact on their lung development is a critical issue to be thinking about.
The elimination of the localized pollution when making a switch from diesel to electric buses is really the primary benefit. The public health benefits are really profound, but there is also an overall environmental and climate benefit to making the switch to electric buses, especially on a large scale. It was mentioned before that school buses, and we don't often think about it this way, but school buses are the largest form of mass transit in the country. And that's really true. There are nearly 500,000 school buses on American roads each and every weekday, carrying millions of kids. If we were to switch, I should say actually, in general, transportation is now the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the country, overtaking the power sector for the first time, and it's also the only sector its share continues to increase year after year. So if we really want to have any effect on our climate and on the environment and on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we have to do something about our transportation sector. That there are a lot of things that we have to do, including electrifying our transportation, both the cars and the trucks that we drive, which account for a large portion of those greenhouse gas emissions, but then also electrifying mass transit. And so if we were to electrify all of the diesel buses on American roads right now, we would avoid 5.3 million tons of greenhouse gases every year. In New York alone, there are around 40 to 45,000 school buses on the road, 10,000 of those in the New York City area. If we were to electrify all of those diesel buses, we would avoid around 780,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions, which is a big number, but it is a lot, and that's the equivalent of taking 151,000 cars off the road per year, which is really significant. And I think that there's probably no greater challenge facing the world in the coming years than climate change and the status quo is not good enough. We really have to take these big and bold steps to make progress at this point. And electrifying school buses is a great one that incidentally also has really, really fantastic public health benefits as well as some other benefits that I'm sure we'll talk about through the rest of the night. And then the final point I'll make about electrifying buses and really electrifying transportation in general is that it makes a big impact right now, but it continues to get better as time goes on and as the electric grids get cleaner. So right now, you're avoiding 5.3 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions on some electric grids that are still coal, and electric buses are still cleaner than their diesel counterparts, even when run on a coal electric grid. But as the market share of electricity increases coming from our renewable sources like wind and solar, electric buses just continue to get cleaner, and those climate benefits continue to get bigger.
Thank you. I have a quick follow-up question for you, Kevin. You mentioned that electrifying school buses in New York City wouldn't make a big citywide impact on overall diesel pollution. I wonder if you could speak to, just give the context of what makes up diesel pollution in New York City. Where does it come from, majority?
Yeah, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has long since been addressed, which is why pollution has dropped dramatically over the past 10, 15 years, but we see it kind of leveling off. It's occurred in the last more recent years. The best targets that the city could think about is in-use vehicles. So how do we get the cars that are not working well, their check engine lights on, how do we make sure those cars get fixed in a timely manner, and how do we encourage older trucks and cars on the road to move to newer cars and trucks? That's by far the biggest modifiable factor of pollution the city can do in the short term.
Peggy, I wanted to move on to you, a question for you. Just to ask, where in New York City, now we talked about what makes up the diesel pollution, but where do we see that play out in New York City? Where is the exposure happening?
Well, over 600,000 children are riding school buses every day. Kids from kindergarten to second grade who live half a mile away from their school are riding buses. Grades 3 to 6, they live over a mile from school. And of course, students with disabilities are primarily riding the buses. 160,000 field trips annually for a range of students who are taking that bus. And we certainly know that kids sitting inside a diesel bus may be exposed to 4 times the diesel than someone riding in a car behind that bus. So just sitting in that bus is a very big impact. And given the fact that so many young children are riding the bus at a vulnerable age and window of susceptibility is really important to understand. I've been involved for the past 20 years with the Columbia Children's Environmental Health Center, which primarily looked at the impact of diesel pollutants on pregnant women and their offspring. And what we saw was low birth weight, developmental delays, and increased asthma in children born to mothers who were impacted by diesel. And we were able to determine that through backpack air monitors and monitoring in their residential apartments. So we know that that diesel impacts can have intergenerational effects, and so we understand that our most vulnerable children need to be protected. We see school buses idling outside of schools every day. That only concentrates the diesel inside that bus. So we really need to organize parents, and we need to really have parents talking to their elected officials about this issue, because it's really parents who should be the key target for our advocacy around this issue.
Absolutely. I wanted to take a step back for a second and think about again, diesel emissions on a citywide level. It's my understanding that low-income communities, communities of color, experience far greater exposure and far adverse health risks from diesel. And I wanted to ask you, Peggy, how and why has this disparity developed?
So you're really talking about cumulative impacts, and that's really what the environmental justice movement is most concerned about. Environmental justice communities, communities that are low income and of color, are disproportionately impacted by a range of pollution, whether it's air, water, soil, or whether it's the indoor allergens within their homes. And we all know about the issues with NYCHA and other private landlords. Even in my new school students who were evacuated from their dormitory last night because of the horrible mold situation there. So yes, we know that certain communities are already disproportionately impacted by pollution. What does that mean? It means that some of the communities with the most glaring health disparities are also the communities with the highest environmental exposure, and then those children of color are sitting on the school bus where they're getting even more exposure. So when we look at the cumulative impact, we can then begin to understand the glaring health disparities that continue to increase in our communities.
Thank you, Peggy. I know Harlem is absolutely an example of one of these environmental justice communities. There's communities all over the South Bronx, in Brooklyn as well. I wanted to transition more locally to Brooklyn now and ask you, Adam, if you can describe Red Hook, which has one of the highest asthma rates in the city. And as a resident of Red Hook, how has diesel pollution impacted your community and where does it come from?
Right, so I touched on a little bit of that in my introduction, but I mean, Red Hook is a fairly small community. I think about 11 or 12,000 people. The majority of our residents live in public housing. And public housing in Red Hook is the largest public housing complex in Brooklyn. So I think, as I explained before, during Sandy, we really saw how vulnerable our community was. There were people that were stuck in their apartments, people that were unable to walk downstairs, people whose health in general wasn't very good. And that was laid bare during that Sandy experience. But what I also discovered during my advocacy to plug these ships in, as I said, with the diesel pollution, was that the community is suffering from all sorts of respiratory problems, asthma obviously, the high rates of asthma I noted. The study that I noted, which was from Hunt College, was in collaboration with the Red Hook Initiative, a non-profit that works in Red Hook. And I bumped into the director the other day walking down the street, and I was actually pointing out that the ship hadn't plugged into electricity, which is an ongoing problem, another story. But she noted that someone had just died in Red Hook from asthma. A couple of people, a number of years ago, I think in a calendar year, 3 kids died of asthma. On my block, one of my neighbours who had a child around 9 or 10 at the time, he was being taken to hospital 3 times a week for asthma. And apart from that, on my block, 3 women with breast cancer, not all women, not older women. So, I mean, I feel like there's I know a lot of this is, I don't think the studies have been done enough to show what the actual impact is. But from my experience also with the ships and now advocating for cleaner transportation in general, when we were advocating for the ships to be plugging in and getting off diesel, the EPA came with statements to support it. The EPA said that getting off diesel, removing diesel from the air, was a priority, should be a priority, and the diesel affected mainly, well, especially children, people of color, low-income communities, people that exercise outside. That's Red Hook. That's Red Hook. So I would say in our community, we're uniquely burdened by Red Hook. We've got multiple sources. One of the sources within the community is obviously the buses and the transportation. Red Hook houses now, it used to be home to, I think, around 500 school buses. I think there are a few less now. We have many other trucks, and there's more coming with UPS moving to the neighborhood, and a 3-story distribution center being set up next to IKEA with 750 truck spaces where trucks will come in and out of the neighborhood all day. So it's not the end of the diesel burden with Red Hook, but my feeling is that with the burdens that we've already felt, and especially, as I think you said, there's some low-hanging fruit. I think the school buses seem like a low-hanging fruit, and I think we should be able to do that. And I think that, especially given Red Hook's history and its population, I think Red Hook is a prime example of, or a prime location where this should happen.
Absolutely. Totally agree. So, Kevin, you spoke earlier about how children are especially vulnerable to impacts of diesel, and we know that one major source of their exposure is school buses. So we talk about tackling this public health issue for children. One place that is good to start is school buses. And I wanted to transition a little bit into talking about how we can make that happen here in New York. But first, I wanted to take a moment to say that, as Marcia said earlier, school busing needs a complete overhaul in New York City, not just to be electrified. I'm not sure if you guys have read a lot of the stories that have been coming out since the beginning of the school year, but we have instances of children not being picked up at all for school for multiple days in a row. And as Peggy said, the majority of students who are on school buses are students with disabilities, and they've been taken on really long, winding, inefficient routes, leaving them exposed for longer periods of time, sometimes 3 or 4 hours on a school bus to get to school that should take 30 minutes. So we're talking about electrifying school busing here as a way to mitigate this public health issue for children, but the school bus system in New York City needs an overhaul generally. So back to the task at hand, though. I was hoping to explore some opportunities to clean up the bus fleet here in New York, but I wanted to, Matt, ask you first, what's the availability of electric school buses, and how has it been adopted in other school districts, and how's that gone?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I think it's particularly interesting because not too long ago, electric buses were a bit of a joke in the industry, and for those of us who took it more seriously, it was still like, well, the technology is going to be great when it comes along, but it still has a long way to go, and that's not true anymore. Electric school buses are here. They're ready for the road, and in fact, they are on the road in several places, including a few school districts in my home state of Massachusetts. Actually, I'm so enthusiastic about electric school buses that I came here from Boston today. So there are several models from a number of both traditional school bus companies like Bluebird, and then other companies like a company called Beeline or Green Power that only make electric school buses. And then some of the other manufacturers now, IC and Thomas, have school bus models coming out next year. Once those come out, every major manufacturer of American school buses will have an electric school bus model. So the big questions that come up with electric school buses are always cost, range, power, and battery capacity, and whether they can really handle the routes. And for a long time, the arguments against electric school buses have been they're too expensive and they don't have enough range and they're not as powerful and they can't handle the routes. And now all of those things have sort of flipped around and have become the reasons to switch to electric school buses. So first, on cost, electric school buses are more expensive than their diesel counterparts, but as my mother-in-law likes to point out, anytime we buy a cheap piece of furniture, a cheap toy for our daughter, when it breaks, you get what you pay for. And electric school buses are better than diesel school buses. When drivers report that they're much nicer to drive, they're quieter, obviously the air quality is much better. And they actually end up saving school districts money on an annual basis in fuel and maintenance costs. There are 30% fewer parts in an electric school bus than in a big diesel engine. So maintenance is a lot easier. When something goes wrong, it's easier to fix, and things go wrong at a lower rate than they do with diesel buses. On range, it depends on the size battery pack that you purchase, but these companies have a lot of options. Some of them with battery packs large enough to hit 155 miles on a single charge, which is going to cover nearly every school bus route in America. The nice thing about school buses is that oftentimes they are sort of just sitting during the middle of the day waiting for their next route. So if you do need a periodic charge during the day, generally with school buses, more so than transit buses, you have that opportunity to get that charge. There's a lot of new technology coming out with charging, fast charging, and in-route charging that can help with some of those issues. And then finally on power, the question is always sort of, well, can the electric school bus really get up that big hill? And the answer again is yes, it can. In fact, the electric powertrain is pretty much comparable, if not better, than the powertrain on a similar diesel counterpart. I was talking just last week to someone who's now a retired head of transportation from Fresno County School District, who, when he was the head of transportation, was a really early adopter and got a bunch of electric school buses in this district. Lion, one of the companies I mentioned, asked him to come down to San Francisco last week to the Global Climate Action Summit and drive one of the buses around and do demo drives. And this was in San Francisco, which is known for being pretty hilly. And he was telling me that bus was going up and down those hills in San Francisco so much better than he had ever experienced with diesel buses. So they're certainly able to handle the routes. And then, so just finally a quick case study on one place where it has been done on a pretty large scale and really successfully. There's a school district outside of Sacramento, another California one, called Twin Rivers Unified School District. A number of years ago, the head of their transportation department said, you know, electric buses are coming, they're better for our kids, they're the future. I know it seems difficult to get them right now, but if we put our heads to it and we just figure out how to do it, we can do it. They ended up doing it. They bought 16 electric buses, paying very little out of pocket. They used a lot of grant programs available to them through the state and the federal government, and then they made a partnership with their utility company. The utility company invested $1 million. This is a utility investment. I mean, they get a return on that investment from the buses charging, but so the school district didn't have to pay out of pocket for $1 million of charging infrastructure at their schools. So they got the 16 buses. They did some really rigorous route planning, figuring out which buses need to be where at charged when to maximize efficiency and to minimize cost. And they've been really successful, so successful that right now they're purchasing another 22 electric school buses. So their experience was so great that they're going even farther now. And this, that's one of the larger examples, but this has been the experience in most places that purchase electric school buses. They're coming back from routes with 70 to 80% charge. They're running really well. The kids love them, the drivers love them, the parents love them. So they really are, electrifying your school buses really is feasible to do today. And school districts should be looking into how to do it now.
Thank you. Something that I'm really interested in is vehicle-to-grid technology, and I know up in White Plains, New York, they're piloting an electric school bus program there where they're plugging into the grid. Have you seen any other examples of that happening?
Yeah, so what that is basically because electric buses are taking energy from the grid and storing it in their batteries, and then they use the energy to power the bus. If the bus is idle and sitting and not on, it just stores that energy. And so if you don't need to drive the bus, what you can do is store that energy in the bus, and then with this vehicle-to-grid technology, which is available in some places depending on your utility, but becoming more common, you can actually sell that energy back to the grid during times of high demand. And this works really well for school buses because school buses typically charge overnight when there's low electricity demand, or during the middle of the day when there's not as high electricity demand, and then they're not in use in the evening or in the summers when there's really high electricity demand. So there was a pilot with this vehicle-to-grid technology in California where they found that using the technology and selling energy back to the grid on days when buses weren't in use and over the summer, they were generating $6,000 of revenue per bus per year. So that's another way to sort of mitigate some of those initial upfront costs, which get mitigated throughout the fuel and maintenance costs during the lifetime of the bus, but vehicle-to-grid technology can actually make it so school districts might come out on top and actually make money from making the switch.
Great, thank you so much. I wanted to now open it up to the audience for questions from the panelists. He's asking if it's possible to convert old buses, old diesel buses to electric buses.
Yeah, it's possible. Some places have looked into doing it. I'm not sure that at this point there's a cost incentive to do that versus buying a new bus and getting, all the bells and whistles that come with the new electric buses. Although it, from a reduce, reuse, recycle standpoint, anytime that is possible, I think that's a good idea as well.
Questions? Yes.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about how this push for electric school buses fits into a larger push around school reading or reading that involves kids and kids-related environmental health issues? Like, how is this playing the larger landscape of that kind of work, especially where we all are doing?
Well, the school bus exposure is just a critical one for students who are riding that bus. There are a number of organizations like the Healthy Schools Network that has an audit checklist to really make a sustainable, healthy school. Certainly right now we have a big challenge with lead in school drinking water. A state bill was passed last year that would mandate testing, but it really doesn't go far enough. We have a number of schools in Washington Heights and the Bronx that are impacted, and we probably need annual testing as well as new pipe infrastructure, because a lot of the issue with water, with lead in water pipes is the piping infrastructure, and that may need to be inspected and changed at many of our schools. And certainly there's lead in paint. Many of our schools have peeling paint. Several years ago we had the PCBs and the lighting fixtures, and most of that has been retrofitted. We had coal-fired furnaces in many schools, especially in Queens, and the Environmental Bond Act some years ago retrofitted all of those furnaces, which, as you can imagine, with the asthma epidemic, to have furnaces burning coal in schools was just amazing. And it was a surprise to most people in the environmental community as well. So there are a number of ways we can look at a sustainable, healthy school, and I would suggest looking at the Healthy Schools Network for that.
And I want to say that the Brooklyn Borough President's Office was doing some work around promoting sustainability in schools. Do I have that right, Jeff?
I'm sorry.
That the VP's office had done some work to promote sustainability in schools.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We're still advocating for sustainability when it is maintained, that prep times are free, that sort of thing. So because we think that's actually a place where you can have huge impact. There's the kids take that home. They become home militant of being environmental at home once they go to school. So we think that's a good place.
Great, thank you.
Yes, I'm Maria Brogan. I'm with family members of a group called the Campaign to Make Space for Quality Schools in Sunset Park, and quality with a capital Q. Not only the buildings themselves, but also the programming, facilities, inside and out. That came to our attention early on was the plight of children in special education when the parents came to us. That's really nice that you're advocating for new schools, because most of our schools are at 160% capacity of utilization, which is 1.6 children for every child that should be there. So crowded is a nice word for it. So the parents are saying, that I have to stand outside the school, bring my child to the school that he or she is assigned to originally, waiting for a bus that sometimes comes even a half an hour late or doesn't show up at all, to take my child out of this neighborhood because of the school is overcrowded and there's no room for my child in their assigned school. Well, that was a new one for all of us who had started this campaign, because fortunately none of our children have, mine is now an adult, but the young parents, no one had a child with special needs per se. and we started to look into it. So we approached City Hall, we approached different people. Was there any way of knitting the school bus system with Access a Ride? Here's a child with special needs. Access a Ride is to help people with special needs get around the city of New York. And if a bus is not available because of the school, if the bus is necessary, why would you have a child, a little 5-year-old, a little 4-year-old with special needs, standing outside in the rain and the snow because you can't enter the school because there's no one inside that school to take responsibility if anything happens within the school?
So the question is,
The question is, you know what the question is. Why is it that after, and I agree with all of you, and this is horrific, this is a nightmare for parents, for all of us. I've had asthma since I was a child, and so all of this affects all of us, and it doesn't go away. It's not curable. Sorry. Why is it that until we get to that point where we buy electric school buses, electric MTA buses, and things, the technology is in or the money appears, that we don't seem to be able, as government, to speak across agencies and sit in a room around the same table and say, here's a constituency that needs service X. In this case, good transportation, healthy transportation, fast transportation. And say, just because it's Access a Ride over here, or the school bus is over here, why can't, I know MTA is the state and it's an authority and all that good stuff, but in the end, we're all paying for this. Our pockets don't have a name on it. Our quarters, our dollars don't say MTA on it. When you pay it, you pay it. What, is anything happening in that field to force, maybe not the word to force, but you can't force government to do anything, but to instigate that kind of collaboration?
In my transportation coalitions and advocacy groups that are part of it, it's an interesting question. I've never heard anyone bring up using Access-a-Ride or making Access-a-Ride accessible to students. Matt, have you heard anything about that?
No, but certainly, my colleague Zach will talk about that as a solution. If you think about actually solving the problem by engaging the people on the bus and the families, it's a logical solution.
Right. That's why we need parents and families to speak up for the needs. So
We have time for one more question. Maybe two.
Good afternoon, my name is Amy Sai. I'm the Citywide Council, District 75. I'm a parent leader and advocate. My question is, District 75 program, the DOE, is a 12-month program. Our children take the summer school, they take buses to get to summer school and go home from summer school. And they also need adequate ACs on these buses during the summer, especially the summers that we had, that were 95 to 100 degrees. Will the electricity for these electric buses sustain the ACs and to run through the summer? Because you did mention that, some of these buses will have enough power for the summer, just because many of the buses are not going to be running through the summer or during the holidays. But our program runs for 12 months. Will electricity power enough for these students with special needs?
Yes. The buses typically have, the air conditioning question, the buses typically have air conditioning as an option in the electric school buses. Certainly, that also uses electricity, which some people, the issue with it is that it will shorten the range, but think about a bus with 155-mile range. Typically, putting air conditioning in isn't going to cause a huge problem if your school bus is driving less than 155 miles, which typically they are. And then, yeah, absolutely. So the buses that aren't running in the summer can then store energy and sell it back to the grid, but there's no reason that you can't still just be charging and using the bus during the summer as well, instead of using it as energy storage.
I would just say heat is an important exposure, and a significant amount of our public schools have no air conditioning. And as we have more extreme peak days due to climate change, we're really going to have to look at how we retrofit our schools or maybe change school scheduling so that children can really learn in school that it's not overheated. And of course, as we know, excessive heat also can exacerbate asthma attacks.
Last question? What's it behind me?
When will this take effect?
When will electric school buses be in effect? That is a perfect segue into our next section. We're going to be talking about a couple of different ways, opportunities that we've identified for bringing electric school buses into New York City. So stay tuned. We'll go through that next. So let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to go off, start off here. So in case anyone here is not familiar with the Volkswagen settlement, so Volkswagen, the car company, was caught illegally rigging their vehicles to pass emissions tests when they weren't. So they were illegally dumping tons and tons of diesel pollution into our air and rigging their vehicles to pass the standards tests. And they were sued by the federal government and forced to pay over $4 billion to mitigate these diesel pollution. New York State received $127 million from this settlement. It's the second highest, right behind California, for the settlement. And so for the past just about a year, the League of Conservation Voters has been running a campaign, the Clean Buses for Healthy Niños campaign, that was targeted at getting this $127 million earmarked for electric school buses and distributed equitably to communities across the state that are overburdened with poor air quality. So we've been doing that for about a year, and just a few weeks ago on September 5th, the governor and the Department of Environmental Conservation unveiled their plan for how to spend this money. So there were, under the terms of the agreement, there are 10 eligible projects that this settlement money could go for. All of them have to do with mitigating diesel out of our air. And the governor announced that at least 40% of the overall funding, so which is about $52.4 million, was set aside for buses specifically. So we consider this a huge victory, and it's certainly hard fought from a lot of people who are here in the audience. But now the advocacy and the work will continue. We're going to be making sure that within this pot of money that school buses get a fair shake and that environmental justice communities get a fair shake, because the entire pot will go towards transit buses, paratransit buses, shuttle buses, and school buses. So DEC estimates that the implementation of all of these projects, that includes the school buses, but also everything that the $127 million is going to go to, will reduce lifetime NOx emissions by at least 4,500 tons, which is the equivalent of removing 65,000 cars off the road, which is a significant amount. And then the replacement of buses and trucks specifically will reduce 130,000 tons of CO2 emissions from the air. So we see this as a really important opportunity that municipalities, school districts, and school boards across the state should take advantage of. Now that the plan has been laid out, it's up to school districts, school bus companies, school boards to apply for the money to fund electric school buses. So we're going to be working with our partners, including NAGS, Carroll Gardens Association, to create demand among communities with parents and the teachers, to create demand to say, okay, this money should be invested in my community specifically. I want my bus route to be electrified, and we're hoping for that to be the second phase of our Clean Buses for Healthy Niños campaign. But I want to transition now and call up Zachary Lerner, who's going to talk about another option for electrifying in New York City.
Hey everybody, my name is Zach. I'm with Align, which is an alliance for Greater New York. We're a coalition of unions, community organizations, environmental advocates, all trying to actually create real transformation here in New York City, in New York State, and across the country. So I'm here to talk a little bit about worker cooperatives. So folks have heard all night all about the problems with our school busing system. We've heard about the amount of time it takes for people to for students to actually get to school, or people on their bus for about 4 hours or more, or some people weren't even picked up this year and had to wait 3 days before they even got to get to school. I mean, it's been front page story. You've been seeing so many problems with the school bus companies. Right now there are about 50 conglomerates who are, sorry about that, we have about 50 conglomerates who are organized into 125 companies currently here in New York City holding the contracts for all the school buses. I mean, this is not something, like these problems that we're seeing right now is not something new. We have parents who've been involved in our campaign who, have had kids in the system since 1994 who have been seeing some of these issues, and it's only been getting worse and worse for the past for decades now. And so this is why we want to actually create a new thing, something that is actually different from what we're seeing with the current bus contractors and current bus companies, and actually something that's different. I think we heard a lot about how people were saying, parents are the ones who actually know what is going on for their students, especially special needs students. A lot of the workers even know what are some of the issues going on, but in the current school bus companies, you're not hearing their voices heard. You're not hearing the parents' voices heard. You're not hearing the advocates who have been rallying year after year, calling for changes being heard. And so that's why we've been working together to align along with ICA Group, League of Conservation Voters, different council members, and other community groups, education groups, worker organizations, etc., are all working to actually create some transformation. So one of the things we've really been proposing is actually doing the first of this kind of electric school bus parent-worker cooperative, which would be owned by the workers, in which they actually have decision-making over how the structure is, with a board that actually consists of parents, educational advocates, the workers and drivers who are there, along with experts who actually have expertise in transportation networks and companies, so that we can actually create a better, more efficient system that, one, it's good for the environment, because we're seeing, transition to electric buses, which will be much, as we've heard from a lot of folks tonight, have actually been really good for actually, cutting down on diesel emissions and actually leading to healthier air for our kids. And then at the same time, being able to have it so that workers are getting the right training and they know what the training is, so that they can actually, provide the best services for these kids, especially special needs kids who you hear tragedy after tragedy every year about what is going on with them. And so this is all what we want to actually do. So we're actually pushing right now. We're actually looking to actually either acquire a company or actually start our own company, so we can actually get this going, so we can actually set the model of what we can do here in New York City, so that when we start with a pilot program and show that we can be successful with a few routes, this helps us lead to actually expanding to more and more companies that actually take on many of what's going on in the system by removing a lot of these 50 companies, or at least changing them, so that we can actually see something new here in New York. And so this is what we're pushing, is actually, transforming the entire system as it is to something that is actually good for our students, who are good for the parents, workers, our environment, and everybody. And so if folks are also interested, there's going to be a rally at 11 o'clock on City Hall on Wednesday around this. So if you need any information, feel free to come see me or Matt or Joe in the back. All right, thank you.
Now I want to call up our final speaker of the night, Kevin Grant, who's going to speak a little bit about pilot programs and the push for legislation in City Council. Kevin?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right. My name is Kevin Grant, and I'm here tonight to talk about my transition to advocacy for electric school buses. I was a parent, with my kids going to school every day, and they would walk to school, and we would see 1 or 2 school buses in the mornings. And then one day I chaperoned my daughter to a play about Harriet Tubman. When we came out, there were about 20 other schools there, and there was just a sea of school buses and a cloud of smoke. And you could smell the diesel fumes, and I was just like, this is insanity. Why are we doing this? These buses are the best technology to go electric, because we know their routes, we know where they need to be charged, and they don't travel very far distances. And they serve our children, which are the most susceptible to these pollutions. I just started to learn about what was going on, because there wasn't really much being talked about in the general news about electric school buses, and I found out that there were a few companies that were doing things, and then eventually I reached out. Actually, it's perfect that we're here. I started reaching out to some of my local representatives, and I wasn't getting much response, and I saw the Brooklyn Borough President speaking on electrification and vehicles, and I reached out to him, and over the weekend there was a flurry of emails, and I got in touch with Jeff Lowell, and they brought me into a reset meeting where I got to meet Adriana, the New York League of Conservation Voters, and other advocates, and I saw that there really was a core of people who were trying to push this issue, and it was very inspiring and got me more motivated to get this done, because it's something that needs to get done. We're all here, we know about it, the technology is now here, as Matt was talking about, and New York City really needs to take the lead on this issue. We have 1 of 10 school buses in the nation. It's ridiculous that California is killing it, but they are, because there's a crisis in California. The smog has been known for years, and everybody feels that it's really important, but it's just as important in New York. And California reported that they had 87 straight days of ozone non-compliance, but New York is not far behind. Every week I've seen non-attainment in New York City metropolitan area from the state. The EC's been putting out warnings, but nobody's hearing it, nobody's listening. We have to ring that bell louder. We have to get more active, get our voices known. It's great to see all of these people here, but we need to come together and push this issue very strongly, get the community behind it, and just inspire more people. There is a bill out from Daniel Drum, the city council member from Queens, and it's first year it just sat there, and this year it looks like it might sit again with little to no action. They need to have community hearings on this, and we need to tell them what needs to be done. It has some good provisions, but it can be better. There's no incentives to go electric. Right now the requirement is to be all electric by 2040, but there's no reason why we can't do that faster. Shenzhen in China did 17,000 transit buses in 7 years, and that was starting in 2000. We're now 2010. I mean, we have 1 electric school bus in New York City, in Long Island, and the worst part about it is most of these buses in California are made by Transtech, which is an hour out of the city. They're actually making the school buses in New York, shipping them across the country to be used. Why are we not using them in New York? I mean, you have New York companies who will benefit New York, who have the technology, and people are ignoring it. But now really is a watershed moment with all the complaints about the school bus system. I mean, there's no reason why this issue cannot keep growing, and we have the technology. It's here. Every school bus manufacturer is going to have an electric school bus. The costs are coming down, and they're coming down even faster. Even before Bluebird got their buses on the street, the batteries dropped about 50% before they even started selling them in like 3 or 4 years. As electric cars, electric transit buses, all this technology is interchangeable. The cost will come down, and by 2025, there will be no reason not to buy an electric school bus if we push the issue. If we sit back and ignore it, it'll be 2040 and we'll be still driving the same diesel buses. Right now, a diesel bus can go run in New York for 16 years. That means your kid will go to kindergarten and can graduate college on the same bus. And the EPA is not doing anything to make the regulations more stringent. They haven't looked at it in like 5 or 6 years, and the older buses don't have to comply with the newer regulations. It's insane. And what they're doing to lower the emissions on the diesel buses are adding costs. They're adding catalytic converters, which can add other emissions as heavy metals and stuff, and they're actually treating the diesel emissions with urea. So that can lead to ammonia being, exposures can actually get more harmful, and they have to be maintained. And if they're not maintained, the pollution will go back to just a raw diesel, unprotected engine. And the transition to gas and CNG and propane, there's no point. You're just building more infrastructure that's going to be wasted. We spend that little extra money now to invest in electric. They'll make the cost come down faster, quicker, and better. I mean, this, it's just so infuriating that it's taken so long for this issue to pick up speed, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm supporting, Matt, and that's why we're trying to get pilot programs going. We need more than one. We need 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a large industry and a large base. I mean, 10,000 buses just for DOE. We're not talking about church buses. We're not talking about private buses. I had to pay a private company to transport my child back and forth from school last year because we were too far. There are about 18,000 school buses to 15,000, which makes New York City alone a top 10 state for school buses. New York has twice as many school buses as any other state except for Texas. New York needs to take the lead now. Yes.
Half the government has looked into hydrogen fuel cells.
Hydrogen is not for transportation, not for small transportation. It's just a waste of energy. By the time you take the energy to split the water, to get the hydrogen, to put it into a fuel cell, to then turn it back into electricity, because they really are electric vehicles. They'll be fueled. The hydrogen is just a way to store energy. So if you're going to store hydrogen, you need to do it on a large scale. Maybe for ships that go across continents or oceans, or for storing excess energy to be used later. But to put it in a car is a waste. We have probably 3 hydrogen fuel stations in New York State. California has probably 15. You would have to build the infrastructure, and then you're talking about, tanks that they're safe, but I mean, it's a waste of time for transportation. It really is. Hydrogen would be better for large energy storage. By the time the cost difference for the extra technology would be
We
wasted.
have vehicles that are being used hydrogen, and they produce buy fuel cells online, and you can just install the battery as a filter out the water and the electricity. It would cut the emissions more than half, and they would get more money to the town.
You're saying, yeah, I mean, if we want to store the hydrogen as a way to keep the electricity to fuel the cars, that's fine. But putting hydrogen fuel cells on vehicles they've tried it in California, a lot of compliance vehicles, and they haven't sold, and they haven't done very well. It's just not good for day-to-day transit. For large energy storage, that may be a better solution, but for actual transportation, it's not, to power the actual vehicle.
Thanks for watching the Electric School Bus Campaign's YouTube channel. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. To get notifications of our latest videos, hit the bell in the upper right hand corner. If you found the videos informative and entertaining and would like to help the channel to grow, don't forget to click that like button. But the best way to help us grow is to share these videos on your favorite social media site. You should also visit our website, electricschoolbuscampaign.org, for more information, or follow us on our social media websites, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and Instagram. You'll find the links below in the comments section, or search Electric School Bus Campaign. To learn more about what's going on with the Electric School Bus Campaign or in the electric school bus world, choose one of our videos below. I hope you enjoy. Thanks again for watching, and continue to spread the word.